Matt, what's up, brother? I am very excited to have you on and kind of go over all the things that you got going in your world. I really appreciate had a chance being on your show and getting a chance to talk. And so I'm equally as interested about what you guys are doing, especially from a not standard societal approach.
Yeah, that seems to be the underlying foundation of it all, man, is this not standard sort of deal. So yeah, it'll be fun to talk about, man. I
Yeah, so I
appreciate it.
guess first lead them off, man. Let's you want to give a little introduction and background and basically
Yeah,
why you're here?
yeah. I'll give the 30,000 foot overview, and then we
Love
can
it.
go anywhere
Love it.
where you want to go, man. Turned down a job at the White House as a young buck to then realize I had, you know, spent years doing really well at the game of school, but had no idea who I was or where I was going. Right, I was a straight A guy all through grad school. Turned down that job and went, okay, well, what the hell am I going to do now? Right, which you go from turning down a job at the White House. I've always gotten this 4.0s and everything, and the first job I take is at Abercrombie and Fitch because I got nothing else going down. Right, so it's that was kind of my first clue as to like, all right, this whole school thing, man, not necessarily the goods I was sold, but I think there's a part of me that has to own that. So a few odd jobs, I end up at Stanford University, start seeing the game of school for what it is from the inside out, and then kept taking a bunch of naive steps forward, thinking I was going to try to fix things, not knowing what I didn't know. So I was at Stanford for a while, become a public school teacher in California, public school administrator, private school teacher, private school administrator, ultimately seeing the game for what it is. And I went, cool, man, I need to bail because now I got kids and there's no way in hell they're going to this system. So I got to build something that I want them to go to. And that's it. So I started building schools in California, which is about the hardest damn thing. It's as hard as a business as you might think it is, and probably harder. But it was wildly successful, man, and it was great because as I was building those, I'm traveling around the world. This speaking business took off kind of organically. Started speaking to the biggest Fortune 500s in the world and in the country, and they're telling me what they wish they saw from young people that they weren't seeing. And so I'm getting to bring that back to the schools that we're building. And now all of a sudden I've got high schoolers making six figures, and I've got, my own kids. My daughters bought their first horses when they were 9 and 7. They bought them. Right. And so this is from the school, quote unquote, that we were building. So we are just doing things different, man. And then, heard a friend of mine named Tim Kennedy, who and many people know who that is, say he wanted to start a school. So I'm like, dude, I know how to do it. Went out there, helped him launch his, and in the process, man, we just started talking about all the things we could do for young men and for men. And so we put together this other side project for both of us. It was this passion project of pouring into young guys. And hell, man, that has turned into young guys, dads. We're launching the young women's, and then he and I are teaming up with people to launch another 100 K through 12 campuses here in 2024. So
Whoa.
there's a whole lot going down, brother, and it's all really, really good stuff.
Yeah. So let's run back, right? Like, so what is it that you saw within, I guess, our standard scholastic approach that you didn't see really beneficial?
It was a lot of the things that I think everybody sees. I was just curious enough, and I think sometimes dumb enough to ask the question why, and ballsy enough to go ahead and look for the answers. So I'm seeing, I'm working at I'm at Stanford, and I'm seeing these young people who are freaking brilliant academics. They don't know how to write a check. Their life is miserable. They're extraordinarily anxious. They're suicidal. Their parents are a mess. I'm like, okay, well, there's a disconnect there because that's great. You're OChem. I'm not sure how that's going to get you through life. So I'm seeing a little bit there. And then I start to see the game of admissions and like, wait a second. I thought you're supposed to get straight A's, get 1600 on your SATs, write a cool essay, and then you get in. This guy's got a 1.7 and he's on parole. Oh, dad's famous and rich. Got it. All right, cool, man. And there's levels to
You could
this, right?
really see that. Like you would
With
feel pressure from above
I just
or
shit. No, I just knew that wasn't what we were always sold,
sure.
right? I
Yeah. Right.
like
Right.
getting
Right.
into college is this very specific thing, right? That everybody, when we grew up, it was everybody's got to go to college first and foremost, and then this is how you get there. right?
Mhm.
Well, that's kind of how you get there, but there's also multiple layers to this. So I'm like, game being played, game being played. I go into start teaching in kind of this gangland area of California, and I'm having success with these young people. And I'm talking like I got these young guys, and I'm getting them on a good track. They're going home in eighth grade being told to sell drugs, right? Their parents come. If they come to the parent teacher conferences, they're coming with their PO and they got 209 tatted across their neck, right? And it's like, I'm making progress, and the school's like, he needs algebra. And I'm like, he needs to
Yeah.
not be selling drugs.
Right.
He needs to know that he's actually really freaking smart and super cool and actually can do some cool stuff, right? And I'm getting him to realize that. So you start to see, but the funding, right? And it's like, all right, well, again, I'm gonna be the site administrator. Now I'll fix it. And well, wait, this is more about money, power, politics than anything else. So what you see is you start to see this game of academia that we're sold at the very basic sense. We're sold a game of academia and we're told, do well here, life works out well. Well, hold on. You and I both know people who got straight A's and their life sucks.
Yep.
You and I both know people who sucked at school and they're crushing it. And ultimately, it was like, well, okay, well, why then? Why, if these are two different games, why are we doing it this way? You were a Highlands Games stud, you were a thrower, you were a tosser. In no way did you think, okay, man, in order to be really good at that, I've got to get super good at baseball because both have a wooden implement and that doesn't make any damn sense. That game is not the same as that game.
Sure.
We're able to play that game that it's going to work out for the game of life. It's disconnected. And then as soon as I realized it was designed that way to begin with, it was game over. I had to do something different.
Yeah. Now, do you see that it's, and I guess this is a little tougher question, right? Like, do you see that it's become designed that way because, well, that's what people want? Or do you believe it's actually nefarious down from the top?
Great question. Yes. So it's a yes and,
Yeah.
right? So what happens is we have created a religion in this country called school. We've
Boy,
created
don't I know it.
yes, sir. So it
Well,
is
the only God at the top is maximize profits, right? Like,
dear God. That's exactly right. And so there's this old adage by Yodorovsky, and he says, "Birds born in a cage think flying is an illness."
mhm.
That's how I identify school. We're born into this. At this point, this is about 120, 130-year-old experiment in this country. That the fact is, you and I don't know anybody that's 130. Whoops. So then we don't know anybody that didn't grow up underneath this rule and in this system. Now, some people, homeschooled or whatever, right? There, I'm sure, of course, there's that. But everybody has grown up in this conveyor belt model that ultimately was brought over. It was a Prussian military model designed to get the population to blindly obey government and anybody who claimed to be authority. That was the design of it. It was designed for the Industrial Revolution. And then certain industrial magnates like John D. Rockefeller put in the equivalent of $1.3 billion. He said, I want a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers,
Yep.
and made sure that we got this put into place. But now everybody has gone through this, and we have been told this is what it means to be educated. So even if I logically walk people down the path of how this doesn't match a real education, this is being schooled, and it doesn't match the game of life. People will get it logically, but they're like, oh God, but I still want my kid to do trig. And it's like, okay, cool, man. Do you use trigonometry? No. Do you know it? Nope. Why does your kid need it? Because everybody else is doing it.
That's what smart people know.
It's a cult.
Yeah, I get that completely, right? Now with the way that system's built up, like, I mean, man, the flaws in it I see are
Yes,
all the
sir.
time now, especially from being this age point and kind of
Yeah.
seeing the game for what it's worth, like you're talking about.
Yep.
And what you guys are trying to move to now,
Mm-hmm.
do you see this as more of like the evolution of what education is supposed to be, right? Because like I do believe, say, my grandparents coming out of World War II,
Mm-hmm.
when that was the majority of jobs were going to be these factory positions and
Yes,
pension
sir.
style jobs, that like the education system was more valuable then and
Correct.
did prepare a little bit more for that lifestyle afterwards.
Agreed.
you know,
You're exactly right. And there wasn't um, a library on every corner, and there wasn't this thing called the internet where you had access to all
right.
information, right? So you had certain gatekeepers of that information. So it did make sense for a while. College very much made sense
Hmm.
for a while. If you could get it, very much did. But what you said, I like the way you framed it, is the evolution of, well, at this point, if you have access to a library card and you have access to the internet, you have access to all information of all time
Well,
for the
we're at a
most.
very different place on Maslow's hierarchy of needs as far as most people in our country goes, as far as food, water, shelter, right?
Correct.
Now, the education that we're learning into, and especially what we're pushing as important and what we're pushing as what looks like success and failure to people,
Bingo.
instead of teaching entrepreneurship and creative problem solving and teaching these things that we need for a more artistic direction for people to grow and explore versus
Mm.
the sit down, shut up, fall in line. I believe our current school system was designed to make very good factory workers and soldiers.
Bingo. That was it. It's in blind obedience therein, right? That's exactly what it was designed for. So that's exactly what you're talking about. The evolution of that is absolutely what we're discussing. Is okay, cool. Now that everybody has access to that, we have to go back and ask the question: what should education be for? Like, what does that mean now in the 21st century, in 2023? What does it mean to be educated? And I would argue that, ultimately we're trying to get to sovereignty, we're trying to get to freedom, but again, what are the meta skills within that? So part of that is being able to learn what you want to learn when you want to learn it. It's being able to figure out how to build a network to team with those who know the things that you don't, but you don't want to learn. It's the willingness to unlearn. I mean, right now I've got a
Yeah.
iPhone whatever right here, right? Well, 10 years from now, this thing's as good as a freaking pager.
Yeah. It's absolutely a boat anchor.
It absolutely is. So I'm going to have to be willing,
Mhm.
in being educated, I'm going to have to unlearn this. I'm going to have to ditch this thing for whatever makes sense next, right? AI, like it or don't like it, don't care. It's here.
The
So
toothpaste
it's
is out of the
cool.
bag. And I think people's panic about it is really misguided. And
Absolutely.
the real fear about AI, look, as we've trended downward in uh, number of members of a family in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And that's due to, well, every family doesn't have a farm and we're not needing 8 and 9 kids to handle whatever it is, plus child
Yeah.
mortality, whatever else. It's trended down. And as that's continued, our culture has decided that maximizing profits being the number one thing that we really give a shit about. And whether
Mhm.
that's our government trying to do it in minimum effective dose of how we handle healthcare and everything else for a for-profit business, or our education systems and still convincing people that paying these gigantic sums of money for this antiquated system of
Mm.
certification that has dick to do with on the job training and people have no actual life skills when they come out of it, that like we're gonna have to make that shift. We're gonna have to continue that way. And my fear with the AI, right, is as this continues to get better, all these people that have leaned on gig jobs and become what we tried to class up in the last 2 years as essential workers, which the truth
Yeah.
is are people at the bottom of the totem pole that the top doesn't give a fuck about.
Yeah. True story.
And that what if we're gonna lean on maximizing profit is what we want, those companies are going to eliminate the problem. And the problem with scale at that is people.
People.
People are unreliable and they'll fill it in with robots.
Yeah.
That'll
Yep.
be self-driving cars will eliminate all the Ubers.
Yeah, that's it, right? And so, and I'm with you on that. Um, and I don't know the answer, but I do know
No,
that
there's not any pretty answers for that.
the adaptation is the best answer I can think of,
Mhm.
right? Because the reality is, when the printing press started and we started making books, there was a cultural backlash at that time where people were like, "Okay, what is this going to do? Like, all these kids are going to have their noses in books these days. They're not going to get out there and work on the farm. They're going to start reading, and like, what is that going to do to the children, right?" And we look at that now and we're like, "That's. I wish we could get more people to actually
Right.
read." Right. And so there's always this element of things moving forward. The problem is, AI or otherwise, things are moving forward so damn fast
Yep.
now. that there's always going to be the new tool. So our need, again, talking about what it means to be educated, it's a need now to be able to somewhat adapt to whatever these changes are. And that's a level of education to go, okay, well, this is how the world looks now. What do I have to do? Who do I have to be? Who do I have to connect with? What's the next move? We've never had to figure it out as fast as we do now, but the most educated, I would argue, be the ones that really dive into that.
So are these basically, I mean, is this privatized schools? Is this how this sets up? Like, I guess I just don't know as a 40-year-old guy without any kids, right? I have very little concept of what
Good question.
the education system looks like these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, it's a good question, man. So the downside of privatized education is the fact you got to pay for that education, right? That's the hardest part. So in the schools I've built previously, I created a few in California when I still lived there, and then I helped people launch. I've helped launch a couple hundred of these around the world, and now Tim and I are taking our own bent on it and launching 100 plus here in 2024. Um, I knowing the game of school, being a public school teacher and administrator, private school teacher and administrator, I launched those campuses with a couple things in mind. One, I did them as more like homeschool co-op from like a legal standpoint, where I had all my families register with the state as homeschooled, but they paid a membership fee to come there, and we actually had real
Mm,
educational experiences. I did that partially to stay in the gray area so that
sure.
California couldn't tell me what to do, right? Including like, hey, this whole 2020 thing. I don't know if anybody ever heard of it, but this whole COVID deal, right? Everybody was shutting down. I expanded. I bought two more campuses and served hundreds more kids during that time, partially because nobody could tell me to shut down because we operated in this gray area, right? And we did it on purpose so that we could provide a great education. There's still that element of having to pay for it. So we ran our campuses in ways that we could get the cost per student. I don't remember what the national average is now that public schools spend. Cost per student is somewhere around 16, 17 grand, I think, maybe a little higher per student per year.
Okay.
We could run our campuses at $1,500 to $2,000 per student. So
Oh,
if
that's
tuition was
interesting.
higher, I had a little bit of a buffer that I could play with a little bit of a scholarship program, right? And I'm helping them be entrepreneurial. I said I had a couple high schoolers making six figures. Well, that's not everybody, but I
Sure.
also have high schoolers that were working enough to pay their entire tuition themselves. Like they were getting that skill set, they were building their business, and they were able to pay for it themselves. There's value there too, I believe, right? And then as Tim and I are launching, so one of the things that we are doing is we are launching here in 2024 because again there is a tuition involved. We are setting up a very specific. We have a foundation, a private foundation, and we have another 501c3 that we're getting set up. The one 501c3, the new one, since it's going to be majority veteran owned, it's going to allow us to connect to various grants that we can use for a scholarship fund that doesn't tie us to any state licensing, state dictates, mandates, whatever. And then on the foundation side, we're actually setting up an entire payments system. Think about Stripe. It's the exact same thing,
Mhm.
but it's Apogee Strong Payments. And what that does is, yes, for all of our businesses and all the schools, we can run tuitions through Apogee Strong Payments. But if Matt uses, Matt Vincent uses Stripe at all for anything, he can now convert to Apogee Strong Payments. Fieldcraft Survival, Mikey Glover can convert everything to Apogee Strong Payments. It's the exact same thing for every other entrepreneur, although they know we won't shut them down like Stripe's
Sure.
woke ability will. And then in that 3% margin where Stripe makes all their money, we have that margin going back to the foundation into the 501c3 that we can use as a built-in scholarship program to essentially drop or eradicate costs for people to go to these schools.
So why is the public school system so expensive with what we're getting out of it? I mean, this also isn't anything anyone has celebrated in our culture in quite some time. It's not like anyone's
No,
proud of our
but
public
no
school
doubt about
system.
it. No doubt about it. So we have balloon. these balloon salaries for all of the, administration and your superintendents. You've got all these balloon salaries, but you have all of these lobbyists and you have all of these special interest groups that all need their money. They need their funding. And a lot of it is around innovative programs, or it's around curriculum. We talk about like Pearson and Houghton Mifflin and all these guys making textbooks, right? Again, library, internet, you got access to everything. Khan Academy is a free platform that does literally every quote unquote subject under the sun, K through 12 at three. I know Sal Khan personally. It's overkill. It's like 3 times the amount of work to finish his stuff. But we still have all these textbooks being made. Pearson last year, they made more money than any NFL team.
Pearson on school textbooks that we don't need to be printing anymore.
Yes. So there's a lot of money power politics at play. It's a bunch of wasted money because it's not going to the kids for anything that's moving a needle forward. Testing, all of that costs money.
Well, the old guard, right? Like that's what we're going to be continuing to fight with. So where in this are you guys running into the most friction?
What's funny, man, is it's the parents. Like, we understand how to play the game legally from a legal standpoint, to do things right, not operating in an illegal fashion.
Sure.
But operate in a fashion that lets us do what we want to do and keeps everybody else out of our business so we can actually make educational centers that matter. The biggest friction comes from the parents who say they want it, but it's the emotional attachment to the cult of school.
Really?
Oh man, I'm telling you, it is I had so one of the schools I ran,
like needing a gold star essentially is what they really need.
Yes. Listen to this. So this conversation, I'll tell you right here. I had a lady who was a public school teacher. Her son, even though she saw the issues within the public school system, so she sent her middle school age son to one of my campuses. This young man we didn't do grades, but he would have been what you would call quote unquote sixth grade, I think, right? So he was like 12. So he's 12 years old. She schedules a meeting with me, and she comes in and she's like, hey, we need to talk. She's like, so I'm a public school math teacher, but I actually don't know anything about numbers or money. I've bankrupted our entire family. So like tuition, I don't think we're going to be able to pay tuition anymore. And she's like, and there's another thing that's bothering me. She's like, my son, yes, he's happier, than he's ever been. Right. Yes, he is, he's got more friends than he's ever had. Yes, he's taking on more responsibilities at home and he's taking on these chores and he's not complaining. Yes, he's got this business and he's making $2,000 a month right now as a 12-year-old, but he's still at 5th grade level math. And that's just really, really hard for us.
Where are they getting the equivalency test done? Like, I guess that would be my real question, right? Like, where's the equivalency test?
Yeah, they're basing it on, there's no such grade level is not a real thing. It's a thing that we've made up to give to kids.
Absolutely.
So she's getting it from any of the other academic programs, because we still give academics a chance and a choice. So like they have the choice to do as much academic work as well. I've watched kids go through the entire K through 12 academic journey in 3 years, the entire thing. So we still have platforms for them to be able to use it. And he was operating on a platform, and it was Khan Academy in particular, where he was still in that quote unquote 5th grade math, hadn't moved into 6th grade because he was busy, building a life for himself and crushing it. And she's like, oof, he's not there. And all my other friends have their kids at that age that are doing 6th grade math. I'm like, are any of them making $2,000 a month? Right. Super happy. She's like, like it's those conversations, man. I had a company change their entire national policy, 800 employees across the U.S.
And this age range is us, right? Like this is the parents we're dealing with.
That's correct.
Fuck, I want to blame it on the old folks, but it's not.
It's like sucked into it, man. The same thing, man. Woman, 800 people in this company, national organization. They had never hired anybody without a college degree. They make a company-wide exception to hire one of my young students When he graduated high school, he just had to turn 18 because of the nature of the organization and of the business. He turns 18, walks across the stage, gets his diploma, and walks right into a job that was paying him $73,000 base salary. He had a bunch of college grads that were reporting to him, and with bonuses, he was going to be able to make six figures his first year as an 18-year-old kid. And his mom goes, "Gosh, I don't like this. I really wish he'd go to college." I said, "Okay, cool. Why do you want him to go to college?" "So that he has a chance to get a good job."
He has a good job.
Bingo. It's
Right, right,
shut
right.
that
The
up,
whole
right?
process again, yeah, I grew up with it, right? Like I went and did it. I didn't excel in the regular scholastic program. I was kind of a B's and C's kid through high school, yet I scored well on the ACT, et cetera, and then
Yep.
ended up with an athletic scholarship. And in college, man, I did enough to graduate.
Yep.
I was not passionate about what I wanted to do was work.
Yeah.
I had jobs the entire time and different things. And man, I just wish I would have been exposed to more entrepreneurial ideas growing up and more ideas of like, hey, there's a lot of fucking ways to make a living other than you show up somewhere and exchange your time for someone's paycheck.
Yep. Bingo. Me too.
And I see part of our system, right, is we're happy to send you into this education system that, the talented kids are going to get it anyway.
Sure.
Right. So they're going to succeed and figure it out.
Sure.
But it's everyone left on the bell curve that gets left behind that's still in that position that they're waiting for some gatekeeper to give them fucking permission
That's
to
it.
try to be great at something. And all the metrics that have ever been used by society to say whether you're smart or can be successful or what job opportunities look like, they failed at
That's right.
because perhaps they're more like myself and a creative thinker and
Yeah.
um
And you're
other
obviously
types
a
of things.
wildly intelligent human being. And so if somebody at your age that didn't have your, whatever the other influences, the influential factors for you, whether it was parents, whether it was sports, whether it was
all,
outside friends, whatever,
all of it, right? Like, man, I look at it myself of how in trouble I would be without,
without all of
if
that.
my parents would have been different or if I wouldn't have been athletic or any of these other type of things.
Exactly. And maybe you had bought the narrative of like, "Oh shoot, I'm not doing great at school. I must not be intelligent." Hey, that's not the same freaking thing. Right. And then just as dangerous, man, you got the people that do really what I fell into that freaking category. You got people that do really well in school. School was easy for me, not because I'm crazy smart, but because I figured out the game super early. So I figured out, oh, I know how to get A's. I get
Yeah,
how to
and if
do
you
this,
learn by
right.
that method, and it does work for a lot of people, that's why
Ex-
we use it.
Bingo. But do they immediately go from there and go into not all the time, right?
No.
So that's it's just as dangerous for them where they're like, wait, everything has been easy so far. I've gotten all my A's. And that's why the companies were hiring me. That's why when I started
Right.
this gig, that's why they're paying me 40, 50 grand to stand on stage for an hour because they're going, hey, I'm looking at all these young people out of Harvard and Stanford and MIT, and we're bringing them in. They're really smart. They suck. We want to fire all of them. Help us to unsuck them or figure out
Yeah.
how to do this better. Like, we don't like what is going on. And that was a conversation across all kinds of companies. I mean, I'm talking to the Air Force and Lockheed Martin, and then going to Honeywell, and then going to American Eagle, and then going to Purina, and then going to Wells Fargo, and then they're all facing it, man, because you got kids that have done really well in school, but they're shitty on the job.
Well, and I think part of that is our education system is built so much on memorizing that
Mhm.
it's not a comprehension. We're not focused on education. We're interested in you being able to regurgitate this in the manner
Right. At
that
the
we
same,
said.
that's right. At the
And
same time
then,
as everybody
uh,
else, as at
ba-
your same date of manufacture.
yeah. And
Like,
based on the marketing approach, right? That if you're a loser by not going to college, I love our government's move of like, well, we can give them a non refundable debt to
perfect.
go explore this college thing. And what we really hedge our bets about is they'll enter the job market.
Yep.
They will find work and pay us taxes and pay back this thing.
And
And
that's right.
right when they feel free again, we'll reward them with a big note on a house
That's
to
right.
let them know how successful they are again.
That's exactly right, man. And
And then
this
they're trapped.
and the trap is set. That's it. And then we've bought so hard into that religion that we then turn around and trap our own kids and go, you got to do this too.
Yeah, you get so far in before you realize you're miserable that
Yeah.
most people aren't willing to back out.
That's right. And
Just
so
go further and think it's waiting on the other side of whatever, and it's
that's
not a
right.
destination. That's not how any of it works.
That's exactly it. But you're taught that it is, man.
Yep.
You're taught that it's a series of boxes to check. Right. And so you're checking all the boxes and you're like, damn it, I must have missed a box because things aren't, I don't feel good. I must have missed a box somewhere. What's the other box? So you look for the authority to give you the next box. That's a huge part of that, man. So that's one of my biggest beefs with the schooling system in general is that it gives you that mindset. You habitually get into that mindset and it's a really hard thing to break. I know if I've done, if there's few things that I've done for 12, 16 years. But when I've done something that long, I get pretty freaking good at it. And so when you've done 12, 16 years of being blindly obedient, checking off other people's boxes,
Yeah, you're
that's
really good at it.
become
It gets really uncomfortable when you don't have permission to try a new thing. Yeah.
bingo,
So we're
bingo.
aware the normal school system's a big bag of shit.
Yeah.
So let's focus the rest of this on. So how does curriculum with what is it? Apogee?
Yes, sir.
I'm okay, good. I'm
Uh,
so bad with one of those. Every once in a while I catch a word that I just can't fucking say the
I'm with
same
you.
way
Yeah,
twice.
I didn't even know what the
Uh,
word was until we sat around the round table and figured out we wanted to use that for the company. So it's good.
well, what is it?
So apogee is the highest point of something is the highest peak. So like if you're approaching the top of the mountain, you're approaching the apogee of the mountain. And so that's really what it's about. It's about that journey of just getting better, right? And we always say like we get the top of the mountain, it just means you need to find a bigger freaking mountain. You got to find the next big one, right? And you start working towards the apogee of that. So
Hero's journey.
hero's journey, brother. That's exactly what it
That's
is.
it.
Yep.
So what about curriculum? How do you guys, I guess, what does that look like in comparison to what I know about school?
Yep, it's a really good question. So we got to take a look from a couple different standards. One, what are the meta skills that everybody needs? Two, what are the developmental stages of a human being? So school doesn't take development into effect into consideration at all in the design. So we've been taught very early. Oh, God, shit, man, you got your kids too. They better get. Are they ready for pre kindergarten? Because if not, right, so you start checking the boxes as early as you can, right? So the reality is up till about 8 years old, the kids just need to fricking be able to play. They need to learn what manners look like. And when I say manners, I don't mean like we're all a bunch of little like British kids in
Carrying a
Japanese.
books on their heads, that type of thing, right?
Yeah, dude, right.
What
Just
the far left fork is.
that's right, man. So
Really important things.
really important things. So yeah, dude, yeah, exactly. That stuff that I still don't know. It is but how do you get along with other people? What are good decisions? How can you be in general a good human and a decent human to be around? And a lot of that's learned through free play. Now, a lot of that's learned through parents not being douchebags.
Right.
So our
I,
so
I would say much more than anything else.
much more than anything else. So as we're building these, it's worth a mention. There is a filtering process, like an application process for the parents. That's mostly what we want to figure out. Are you a decent human being?
Mm.
That matters. And then, hey, by the way, while you're here, you're also going to be going on an educational journey. You talked to our men, right? Our men are going through this process of growth. All of the parents and all of the schools, those dads are going through that same thing to make sure that they're going through a process of growth. We're making sure they're staying educated as well moving forward, right? Like that matters so that the young hero is getting growth mindset all day and then they go home and there's nothing competing with it, right?
Sure.
That's on a journey too, man. And so they're doing it together. So up through about 8, a lot of that is very much free play. A lot of that is learning how to make good decisions. And what's weird, I know this sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people, but kids learn to make good decisions by making decisions. So what you do is while they're learning it, you give them great decisions. You give them choices. It's very almost Montessori esque up
Okay.
to about 8 years old, right? A lot of different choices of different jobs and opportunities to take on that reinforces all of these skills without them even thinking about it. It all feels like play, and then a whole lot of free play as well. And then you start having that next phase of 8 to 12, 12 to 16, and then that 16 to 18 is that kind of that final deal. So once they hit that 8 to 12, a lot of it is project based. What we'll do is and this goes into the curriculum. Every month might have a specific theme overall, but it's a project. So maybe that's like, we're going to build friggin' rockets this month, and you're going to test a bunch of different fuels, and you're going to just, we're going to shoot off some rockets and see who could shoot their rocket the highest. Like, we'll give them an arbitrary goal, and then they'll have to go like, okay, so how do we figure out how the hell to even do this? And we'll scaffold it backwards that way.
Mhm.
Right. So it's like, if you wanted to learn jujitsu, we're not going to be like, okay, before you ever get on the mat, we're going to make sure we do a trifold board all about jujitsu, and we're going to make sure we do a multiple choice test, and we're going to show you all that. No, nobody, that shit doesn't work. You get on the mat first, have some experience, and go, okay, you see how you got your ass kicked? So let's dive into some of the moves, like what happened to you, right? It's the same thing. So we give them this kind of a project based goal to go after. Academics are thrown in there. They've basically got different blocks during the day. So they've got a project block, they've got an academic block where they're driving their own academic journey, learning to set goals around their own academic progress. They've got a physical education block that's non-negotiable. And now that block maybe they have a choice of like CrossFit or jiu-jitsu or kickboxing, or but it's real actual physical
Yeah.
movement and education. It's not fucking dodgeball. It we
Sure.
want them to actually
Yeah, it's
understand
not
how
a
to.
piss off class that
Right. No,
we
you
have a fat guy running.
absolutely not. Like, you need to actually learn what it means to be physically in shape, right? Actually, what does that mean to be a healthy human being from a physical standpoint? We talk about mental health for kids. We don't give a shit if we don't care about their physical health. That's the
Yeah.
precursor to mental
Well,
health.
I just fucking hate that we've tried to pretend that there's some separator between the 2.
Right.
This unit is one machine.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So they've got that block there. They have an entrepreneurial block where they are literally going to be starting businesses every year or taking existing businesses into perpetuity. So they all have an entrepreneurial block that they're handling. As they get older, they've got internship, apprenticeship blocks where they're getting off the freaking campus to go work in fields that they think they're interested in working in. And then there is a like a the kind of the reading, writing, Socratic seminar part of it where they learn how to think and how to communicate.
Mm.
That's a big block right there, right? Where they learn what civil discourse looks like. They learn that, at the end of the day, I need to be able to articulate my point of view and bring some evidence to the table. I also need to realize that Matty Vincent's a brilliant guy. He may disagree with me on something, and I need to actually genuinely listen to what he has to say, consider his evidence, be brave enough to change my mind if better evidence is presented, and also be able to go, it's possible at the end of the day, Matt and Matt don't necessarily agree on this, but guess what? That's okay. High five. We're still friends. Let's go hang out. Like, that's okay.
Yeah,
Right.
we're allowed to disagree.
We're allowed to disagree. So we want them to be able to think and learn to enjoy collecting information through reading and Socratic conversation, not for the sake of like, well, why did Gatsby, like, let's analyze why he wore the color yellow. Nobody gives a shit. You read a book to become a better person, right? You want to be a better human. So let's learn to just take a look at books for that and have great conversations about it. Let's build thinkers again, the warriors and the poets, right? The savage.
I would argue the other side of the Gatsby argument, but yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah,
I'm
for
on board. I'm on board for what we're talking about.
yeah. So so those are the general blocks, and all that. And systemically, man, they're taking on responsibilities on campus. Our janitors are the kids. I had a full on 17-year-old kid running the kitchen at one of my campuses. We sent him to Weston A. Price. He learned how to run a school lunch program, making real food. He was the head chef. He hired other students on campus, and they were responsible for taking in the orders every day, making real food. They're like, oh, we got to get 62 orders out by lunch. And so they're in the morning, they're in the kitchen taking care of business, putting out real meals, real food, no processed bullshit, no frozen chicken nuggets, real stuff every single day. They ran that, right? And that also paid for his tuition. Tell me that's not valuable in terms of the skill, in terms of the camaraderie, in terms of the culture. We get the kids running the show. So those are the basic building blocks of the day that got
Now,
through.
do you run it? I mean, from the parental standpoint, right? Like, is this still A's, B's, C's, and D's with a report card that's math, blah, 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 grade 1 through 12? How is that
Yeah.
structured?
So what's interesting is you
By
don't
the
have
age groups like you're talking about.
yeah, you don't have to we don't worry about grades. We're worried about, like, creating real world stuff. Like, you and I haven't gotten grades on anything this year.
No.
What we got graded on was, well, we can look at our bank account, right? We can look at our relationships. We can look at, our goals for our businesses, and are we achieving those goals? Are we not? Are we still like, it's real world feedback. And so we're doing the same thing for the kids. Now, the irony is, depending on, because they start building out, especially as they get older, what they build out are essentially brands. We say that it's a digital portfolio, but it's essentially they're building out the brand of them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're building out, and then we will play the game as they get older to open up doors for whatever is next. So for that young man I mentioned earlier that walked off the stage into that, into that job, we played to his strengths. We knew where he wanted to go. His last couple years of internships and apprenticeship were geared towards the industry that he wanted to go into. So we helped him make connections in the community for that industry, to start meeting the right people, to start developing the skill set that he needed to develop to do that. And we had some kids that wanted to go to college. Cool. So
Right
we
on.
so we did it. Like, we made sure that we're like, okay, what is that game that that college wants to play? Do they want to see a regular transcript? You just make one.
Yeah.
That's all you do, man. That's all high schools do. You obeyed.
What about this permanent record I've heard about for years?
Yeah. You ever seen one? Like,
Well,
what
I
is
don't know where my college degree is. I've never seen it.
no? And chances are, the majority of jobs that say right now college degree required will take you if you just say, yeah, I have it. Now, I'm not saying for anybody to do that. What I'm saying is, most of the time, they're just like,
It's like light fraud. It's barely fraud.
That's exactly it. But it's like I remember Abercrombie and Fitch was the thing. They're like, "Do you have a college degree?" I'm like, "I literally just graduated and turned down this White House job, man. I got nothing." So yeah, I'm down. They're like, "Well, then you can be a manager." I'm like, "All right, sweet." I don't
Sick.
have the diploma yet. I don't have whatever. They're like, "No, you just said you graduated, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "All right, good. You're good." I'm like, "Holy,
Yeah,
I don't
I
have
know.
to show you that I graduated. I could have done this before." You know what I mean? Like, and that's unfortunately, it's a lot of places.
Um, man, so I see. I can totally see the apprehension from this, especially let's say the bell curve of our generation
Mhm.
that really has played by the rules.
Mhm.
Um, the rules at least set forward, right? Like I think those of us who step outside of that anyway realize that they're all horse shit anyway, and you can pretty much do what you want and smile and nod and continue on politely.
Mhm.
Um, I bet it is hard for them to see that, like, but my kid won't have these certifications and they won't have this thing
It's
that, yeah, that hidden, scary, whatever it is that
it's so ingrained, man.
the propaganda behind like the homeschooled weirdo or the kid going to the fancy school or any of this. And well, we don't want our kid to be different. And like, man, fuck yeah, you should.
Hell yes, you do. Because first of all, like, it's like I think it's like 92%. That's like ish of the people in our country who are 18 and older have a high school diploma. Would you say 92% of our population is wildly educated? Hell no, you wouldn't. Neither would
No.
I. So yeah, different is okay. I love the homeschool. Homeschool kids are weird, man. I love that argument. We went to public school. Any weird kids there?
Oh yeah, tons, right? Like it's not like it's an elimination factor.
Bingo, right? So it's like it's not the school thing, man. So people are like, well, if I home educate or if I sign them up to be home, or is my kid going to be weird? Yeah, maybe. If you are, that's a big part of it, right? Are you
Well, I
weird?
mean, it's not like we see a lack of weird or a lack of kids getting trouble up the ladder with more expensive institutions
Totally.
because we
Same
see a
thing.
bigger disconnect from the families because the families focused on making
100%.
money. And when that becomes the biggest goal, kids don't get the attention and nature and nurture that they're supposed to get
Bing-
anyway.
Bingo. So what you start to see is all these platitudes, all these myths that we've bought into, all these things that we've culturally been trained to say. When you start to put them under a microscope, you're like, well, actually, that doesn't even matter. One of the things I like to tell parents to really uh, it's almost like a filtering mechanism to see if we're going to have any more conversations thereafter. As I tell them, like, hey, one of the easiest way your kid really wants to go to college. Cool, sounds good. First, go watch the movie I did with Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla called No Safe Spaces. Let me know if you want to go to college still. But if they still want to go to college, um, then that's cool. One of the easiest ways to get in is to not graduate high school at all. And people are like, and people are like, what are you talking about? You have to graduate high school to go to college. I'm like, nope. Actually, it's easier not to. Because what you do is, as a 16-year-old, you start taking junior college classes, which a lot of times are free in various states. You take those as a 16-year-old, you start earning your junior college credits. You can actually get your AA. You can transfer into a lot of universities as a transfer student adult at 18 with an associate's degree. They'll never even care if you had a high school diploma or not because you've got the associate. And a lot of times you're actually weighted higher than another 18-year-old kid who came out with a 4.3 and a freaking 1600 SAT because you're an adult transfer. And a lot of times that is going to be what's needed to be filled more. There's a million ways to play the game, but it's all a game.
Sure. And that's why there's all the rules and regulations. And that's why some people manipulate it to the best of their abilities. It's no different than tax code, right?
Totally.
Do you think that we've gotten this muddy and off the point just as like the pendulum continuing to swing one way and we haven't ever, I mean, look, man, our education system's not that old. Like as a country, we've fucking been around for like 6 people.
Yeah, right.
And we're on the first draft of a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah, very true.
And it's really time to take that hard look. And I think one of those hard looks that America struggles with is anything that works in self-awareness, right? Like, is I've got to be able to locate a problem and admit that it's a fucking problem so that I can address it.
Right.
And with go rah rah America's number one,
Yeah,
if at any point we step across that line and say, oh man, our government is a big bag of shit, or our education system's a big pile of shit, that means we also have to say we're not fucking great at this.
that's right.
And that's a real struggle for a
It is.
lot of people.
It
The
is.
propaganda is good, man.
It is good, man. And that's the thing. I tell people all the time. I don't think people actually really want full on sovereignty and freedom because there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. I think people are really good at saying what they what they wish they believed. What you do is what you actually believe. I think that's very right.
Man, that's I talk about that with people I work with and people I coach and everything, right? That like
Yeah,
what you say means fuck all.
that's right.
But if you were watching from above, right, and I didn't get any of what's going on in your head and your thought process and the fears and the thinking about doing the thing,
That's right.
and I just watch your actions, and your actions tell me every day by a pie chart of what you're doing, what's important to you.
That's right. It tells you what you really believe. Um, and so that's where it gets interesting because people don't want to actually have to take that look inwards to take on the responsibility that comes with freedom and sovereignty that actually because then at some point you're forced to go like shit, okay, I've got to do something differently. I've got to actually make some change. Yes, this school system is only about 120 130 years, so we should take that into account. That means you've got all of humanity over here and then schooling. And hey,
And
by
we're and of that 120, years, we're really only talking about since 1965 that we're in the pickle we're talking about.
100%.
It's
That's
once
exactly
like the American dream, quote unquote, white picket fence and the kids in
totally,
college and retirement and
totally.
comfortable and feet up doing fucking nothing. And the
Yep.
look that blue collar jobs are below. That's for the uneducated. That's for the, that
Right.
vocation isn't valued, that we fucking moves mass production out of this country. And here we
Mhm.
are.
That's right. We're trying to swing the pendulum back the other way. It's interesting to think too, man. People don't realize this, but like we were as a population, yes, the population was significantly smaller, but percentage wise, we were more literate as a country, percentage wise, before compulsory school. We actually
Mm.
people don't like to hear that because then it goes back to the reality of like, well, it's actually not that difficult to show people how to read or to teach people how to read. It's actually pretty easy. School fucks it up. School actually makes it harder. School actually makes people hate it. School actually like you can take a look at a lot of different things that way too. Um, but you're absolutely right, man. It's and not coincidentally, right about that same time in the early '60s is when the teachers unions were also taken over by very and I don't play the politics game, but very, very left leaning people with a long tail agenda, which is part of why we're seeing some of the crazy boys can be girls and girls can be, whatever. So, and I don't give a shit. I don't care. But it shouldn't be something that is the focus of schools.
That whole thing. And again, I don't have kids, so my opinion's worth very fucking little. You know, the more I've traveled, and as someone who's also traveled the world,
Mm.
is most of this bathroom problem fucking eliminated by just having doors that go to the goddamn ground and having private fucking stalls? Are we not mature enough to wash our hands in a communal fucking area?
Yeah, I know, huh? I mean, yeah, maybe, but it's still a cultural thing. You still got a bunch of people that want to make some sort of weird ass point. You still
But
got a bunch.
that's the same cultural thing that believes this old school system's worth a fuck. That's this old cultural thing that still believes our government gives a shit about our health or happiness.
True story. True story.
Like at some point, right? If I have to look at them, if at best they're incompetent
Hmm.
with decision making for the
Hmm.
greater good, or it's malicious.
Hmm. That's right. That's right. Now, I do lean one way there, but
Like I believe my government operates with malicious intent, and
uh,
therefore, fuck them.
kind of. That's kind of where I roll, right?
Yeah,
Personally.
I feel that way about both sides. As far as
Yep.
I'm concerned, I would.
Agreed. I'm with you. I'm with you. People are like, okay, we people don't know how to they don't know how to look at somebody like that. First and foremost, so we had one of my campuses I would use for all kinds of events, right? Like we hosted a TEDx event. We would host. That's part of the way we stayed as a branded opportunity for growth in the entire community. But it's also one of the ways that we showed, like, hey, man, we're just here for growth, and we stayed out of the political game because I had, Republican groups that would hold meetings there. I'd have Democratic groups holding meetings there. I'd have the people that wanted to create a new fucking California and the state of Jefferson were holding meetings there. Joe Jorgensen was the Libertarian presidential
Mhm.
candidate, right? Joe Jorgensen came and did her Northern California tour at my campus. And so they're like, hey, will you introduce Joe Jorgensen? I'm like, yep, you bet. They're like, will you introduce her as, the next president of the United States? I'm like, I'll introduce her as Joe fucking Jorgensen. Like, here we go.
Right.
'Cause I'm not going to just like, let's not get crazy, but also glad she's here. That's great. So I introduce her.
I mean,
She's
whether I felt like backing her or not, I don't think that's how I would.
100%, right? That's exactly it. I'm not even
Yeah,
going
I'd
to.
fucking voted for her, and I don't think that I would want to. I don't. And uh,
Yep, exactly. So she gets up on stage. While she's up on stage talking, man, I have a few different people that came up to me for various things, but all while she was talking, I had somebody come up to me at one point and go, "Hey, that's really cool. I didn't know you were a libertarian. So thank you. I'm so glad you're a
Jesus
libertarian like
Christ.
I am, right?" And then I had somebody else came up to me and was like, "Hey, that's really cool that you're hosting Joe Jorgensen, but I see the way you run the school, and clearly you're a Democrat. So that's really interesting to me
Oh,
that you've got a
fascinating.
libertarian here." And then I had somebody else come up to me and go, "Hey, are you carrying right now?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got a 38 right here. I'm always carrying on campus." And they're like, "Okay, so you're obviously very pro business. The suit jacket, the beard, the gun. Like, obviously you're a Republican. So why do
Obviously,
you have
right
like
wing.
right? Yeah, exactly." And I'm like, "Cool, man. I've never
Left
even
wing.
voted." So, it's a weird thing, man. People want to box it up, but
Why do you think we want so badly to form those fucking tribes, right? To be part of some community that clearly just is stoked to have members instead of actually serve its group.
it's fear, man. Dogs bark at what they don't understand, right?
Yeah.
My sheepdogs are down and they handle their business, but when they start hearing some people down in the forest on the other side cutting some trees down, they're all about it. And they're going to go ape shit because they don't know what that is. They just know it seems like a threat. So like, I'm just going to bark at it, man. People are the same way. Like, I'm not sure what that is. That means it's a threat. And so, for us, we know, and when I say us, I mean Tim and I, as we're building all these things and the people we're partnering with, we know that that's going to be seen as a threat to a lot of people as well. So we're in this process. Um, One of the things we're going to be super intentional about is, man, I know enough to just fricking bash the shit out of public schools, and I've done my fair share of it, and I probably still
Yeah,
will.
but I find it so much more valuable to talk about what we're doing, what you guys are doing better.
Bingo, and that's the goal. Is that
Yeah, we
like
know their shit.
we want the stories to just be able to tell themselves to where we can just point to it. Like I use CrossFit as actually a really good, whether people like it, don't care. Everybody knows what it is. And you can't deny that they got some results for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And the reality is your Gold's gyms, your 24-hour fitnesses, your Bally's, your whatever, your big box gyms saw that and went, okay, we're going to offer cross training style classes, CrossFit,
Yeah,
right? Made everybody have to shift and pay attention. That's our goal over here. Look, we're never going to bring this down. We're not going to bring down
I
the money
love that.
politics. Let's just go build something that's better and let the stories tell themselves, man.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? That like
That's it.
CrossFit, as much as anything, has probably left a bigger imprint on people picking up barbells and starting to
Totally
move again than anything else. I do believe it has widened the divide between those of us who choose to take part of our health and those of us who really choose to not.
agreed.
Um, I don't believe that that was its intentions, but those of us who were already looking for a way to go found it.
Yeah,
And
right.
those of us looking for an excuse to not be part of something found it.
Found it. Exactly. And I think that's inherent in the design. Unfortunately, that's just inherent in the human design. So we're gonna have the same thing, but I'd rather, like I said, build the biggest building rather than tear the other one down. It's that.
Here for it. Well, I mean, because at some point, right, like you're still gonna for this to really work, you need mainstream support.
Oh yeah, totally. So this next 100%. So this next year, right now we've got, I mean, Tim and I didn't do a big push for this at all. And we still had 350-ish applications from around the world of people who wanted to potentially launch a school with
So
us, right?
what's
So
involved with that? Like, because I immediately think about building this campus and like,
that's what we're walking them through, is that you don't actually, it doesn't necessarily require a build out, it doesn't require it, because we're not, again, we say school because that's what people know, but it
yeah,
can
yeah, again, right. I know that that's my assumption based on a definition of a lot of things. This
and
very
that's
prison-esque looking
totally. So
industrial environment under fluorescent lights like an office building.
bingo, exactly, right? It's like, does this look like a prison? It does. Cool. We can put a
Weird.
school here. So, right. Yeah. So for us, it's, so we're doing this whole filtering process. We're doing background checks. We're doing all this kind of stuff, putting them through a few different steps, figuring out who we're going to partner with. We'll have 100, 150 when all is said and done. And then what we'll do is we'll start taking a look at their locations. Where are you guys? Where can we potentially partner and operate? You can start operationally. Um, in each state, that's a little bit different. Some states you can literally start at a house that's got some land. Like, that's a possibility at some places. Some places you can start, we can start partnering with churches. The very first
Mm.
campus I launched was this old square box of a building that was an unused rec center for this city that I was in. And we just leased that space for a little bit of time. Within 7 months, it was like the CrossFit model of like start in your garage and outgrow the space, right? We did the same thing. We actually went from that to, oh, this old Montessori campus just shut down and that space is for lease. Cool. We moved over there. Hey, this church building just shut down and it's even bigger than this space. Cool. We hopped over there to lease that space. It's a bigger space. We went 4 different places before I finally had the cash to be able to buy a commercial spot that we could have our first campus. And then profits were good. We started going to auctions. There was an old school in Sacramento that was a school up for auction. I got it at like $1.5 million when it was this huge, like, great, man. So we bought that, retro, put a few million into it, and made it, knocked out a bunch of walls, made it more conducive to what we wanted, and we rocked it. But we started in this little crack house of a little box, right? And so we're going to help each of the individual owners. Like, let's take a look in your area. Are there churches we can partner with? Are
Yeah.
there other commercial? But can we start in a jujitsu gym that doesn't use anything during the day? Right? Like, there's a million different ways we can start to get people together and start creating the community around it that will eventually lead to being able to buy or build spaces.
Right
That's
on.
that's how we do it.
So I mean, outside of parents, right? Like, and in this being clearly your driven purpose, man. And
Yeah, man.
fuck, I just love seeing anyone that stoked on stuff.
Yeah.
That where's been the big moments where this has been that, are you sure this is what you want to commit your life to?
um, the biggest one, man, was at the very beginning before I launched the first campus, because it was me leaving a quote unquote good job with a wife and children in California to go, fuck, I think I'm going to go build this. Let's see how this goes. Oh, and by the way, while I'm building this, I don't have any income. So I'm actually building a speaking business simultaneously. Hopefully that works, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's see. And so that was by far the hardest year. But uh, after that, everything has been far more not easy, but everything's been far more simple after that. Seeing that first year of success, being on the road, there was a period of about 7 years straight that I worked every single day, at least a little bit, which is a
Yeah.
big giant kick in the nuts, right? And I got the emails from American Airlines. It's like, thank you for being in our top 1% of flyers around the world, and I was like, fuck me, like that's the worst
Yeah.
ever gotten. And I got it 3 years in a row. So there, there was all of that.
It's
But at this
compounding
point,
interest on investment, right?
that's it, man. That's it. But we're in a good spot now. We know how to do it. It's still hard as hell, but we've got good people. And Tim and I are going to go really, really hard here in early 2024 with a whole lot of meeting. We got a bunch of, I think we have 6 governors we're meeting. Just in a couple weeks, we're going to go here in North
Wow.
Carolina, meeting with the governor and the Speaker of the House, and we're going to be doing a whole lot of the Fox shows again. Obviously, he'll jump on Rogan and Jocko's and talk about all this stuff going forward. So like we're gonna hit the ground hard and really just try to drive families to take a look so that at least they know there's options. If it's not us, it's not us. Like, all good, man. But I want you to know there's options there, and
Yeah.
you don't have to settle.
Last couple things, like other than being brilliant and also with a wonderful name, what, where did you find like the confidence to decide to go into this, right? Like this seems so monumentally overwhelming to say, I'm going to start a school. And granted, I mean, my mom's a teacher and that's about the limit I know.
Yeah, man, it's a big question. Um,
Cause also the problem is so fucking big. How do you feel like you make a dent?
It's huge, man. But that's the only thing you can do is make a dent. Like, you make a dent or you fucking get out. Like, that's it, right? What I saw was that I couldn't make a dent where I initially thought I could. When in the public schools, that was my goal, was I'm going to go make a dent. And I can get super freaking philosophical on this. I can tell you about being 15 on my first date with a freaking 18-year-old captain of the cheerleading team, thinking I'm just a freaking man, and we're watching this movie called Braveheart. Didn't even know what it was, didn't care, with this woman, 18-year-old woman. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm with
Yeah.
this woman. I'm with this woman. I'm with, what is he doing right now? What is he, dude, what is he saying? Dude, this dude's on a mission. Every man dies, not every man really lives. What the? I don't even care anymore that she's there. Like that, literally at that age, I'm like, I'm doing something, man. I don't know what it means, but I'm doing something. I'm going to go balls out. Right. And it's like, there's little moments like that where I'm just like taking the next opportunity. I was an introvert that hated public speaking, right? I hated it. And now I've been on stage. I've spoken to over 500,000 people probably around the world, because it was just like, you know what? I need to do it, to not be afraid of it, to make the impact.
That's it, right?
I need to get in the ring. I've had 100 kickboxing matches at this point. I have 9 mixed martial arts fights. I need to get in there.
So you've always been obstacle is the way.
I have to, because I got to see what I'm made of, man. So DNA.
Were you raised around that? Parents
My dad,
similar ilk or?
no, man, that was part of it. Is my dad had all the ability to maybe do it, but he was a thug. He was
Mm,
a Training Day, right?
okay.
Uh, Denzel Washington. That's my old man and his friends.
All
So
right.
kind of a rough dude for
Yeah,
sure.
entrepreneurial spirit.
Entrepreneurial spirit in all the wrong ways. That's right. That's right.
Wrong's a gray area. Let's,
It's like,
you
dude,
know.
they were the crew running San Quentin in all the wrong ways. I thought you guys worked here. You should probably live here. It was more of those kind of guys. Uh,
Mm.
so there was an element of a chip on the shoulder and got to prove this and that, I'm sure. But yeah, it was. I had to get in the ring, man, for everything.
Um, I guess like last question of just my own curiosity, like with the schools, any religious philosophy, any that type of stuff handled, or what's basis there?
It's a great question, man. It's a great question. So yes, we have a lot of those discussions and conversations, a ton. We would be doing a disservice, in my opinion, to take a stance on that. Now, owners and operators that we work with
Mhm.
are welcome to do so if they so decide. If they say, "Hey, I want to make this a very openly Christian school,"
Okay.
cool. You're able to do that. That's fine. Say that up front, be very vocal about it, and define what that means. Does that person, student coming in, need to have your shared philosophy, or is it okay to come
Sure.
outside and you're just going to talk about it? Define the terms there. But what
Just mind if it's the exposure to and or commitment to very
That's
different things.
that's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. So define what that is. But I will also, again, a lot of these things, Tim and I are leading here's what we've done, here's what we've seen work, here's what we've seen, blow back. I've had enough experience in the game now to tell people I wouldn't take a specific stance. I would just take the stance of we are going to have a lot of religious and philosophical conversations from a Socratic standpoint
Oh,
because the
great.
best way to go is to just push. I do the same thing with our men, right?
Right, 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 right.
None of them know. All those men that you met, there are Christian men, there are social secular humanists, there are guys who would consider themselves atheists, there are guys who consider themselves LDS, there are guys who are, we have Jewish guys, we've got Muslim guys, we quite literally have the full gamut, and they don't know where I stand on any of it because that's not my job. My job is to go, do you really know what you know? Do you
Mhm.
show what you believe what you say you believe? And what about this? I just want to get you to think and I want to get you to talk. And I want to get you, LDS, to talk to you, Islam, Muslim, and go, what do we agree on? What do we disagree on? What is your evidence? What is my evidence? Interesting. Hey, by the way, we can get along. And also, here's what we agree on, disagree. Like, let's have
Well,
those
the
conversations.
creative problem
Interesting.
solving, right? Like, especially with creative, being able to look at all the options from a philosophical standpoint and everything
Yeah.
else, instead of having like one set of tools again, like our school system being this agreement
Correct.
that we've made of this is what looks like success, especially if that is white Jesus and fear of the Bible and the standard Christian tale, right? And like, so one of those questions I'd had from my mother years ago was, did you choose being a Methodist after looking at all the options and it's what most aligned with how you believe? Or were you born it? And if you would have been born somewhere different longitude and latitude, you would just be that religion and think that was the answer.
Right.
Right.
That
And what I want is people to have as much knowledge as possible. And then once you kind of realize that there are agreements anyway and not a ton of rules, take the parts you really fucking like and then toss out the shit that ain't worthful, useful to you.
That's right. And start thinking for yourself, figuring that out and seeing where that's and people will go, well, there is an objective truth. Cool. I'm all for it, man. I'm all for it,
Oh,
objective
yeah.
truth. But if you're gonna go for the objective truth, you've got to be willing to examine your own stuff,
Yeah.
to go take a look at every other possibility to be able to get to. That's just the scientific method, man. You got to be willing to
Right.
shift variables and get down, and it's got to be observable and repeatable. So let's get to that. Let's have those conversations. I always tell these families the best conversations. I've run religious schools before. I've run so many conveyor belt schools. I've run religious schools. The best religious conversations were never there because
No.
there it's just like, yeah, I
Well,
could back on a student and be like, hey, what about this? And then just go, Jesus. And everybody goes, yay. And there's like, that you didn't answer the question, man. There was no thinking involved there at all. Right.
it's interesting, right? Like, so, grew up at a Catholic school and then went to public school, vice versa. And,
Yep.
growing up in the South, being in Louisiana, like a lot
Yeah.
of religious exposure,
Sure.
for good and bad and all different sides of it. And I remember watching kids would compete in this Bible study thing where, like, essentially they would say a Psalms something, 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 and
Hmm.
whoever could get to it and read it the fastest out loud would win.
Hmm.
And so, in the same way that, man, we train repetition, right, with like actionable movement, right, so that muscle memory takes over in the moment of stress, like that's the conditioning that we're building there, right? Is that you immediately fall back on this line of information instead of critically thinking. Like we're teaching you the trigger is you heard this, go to that. That's how you win.
Quickly, right.
Yeah.
And so part of you're spot on, man. So part of what we do with our men and with our women too, as we're launching the women's program, is when we get into the month where we really focus on spirituality. It's not something you can encompass in a month, clearly, obviously. But
Right.
what we do is instead of you people have heard of the straw man argument, we do a steel man argument. So part of their assignment is to engage with their own beliefs and go, what would somebody outside of this belief system see is potentially wrong here and can actually prove myself wrong. It's a way harder exercise, because we realize that, and then simultaneously they start studying that logical fallacies, because the adherence to immediately defaulting back to spitting out the biblical verse, whatever, like, well, that in itself is an appeal to authority.
Right.
If
That's
right,
exactly right.
Matthew Vincent doesn't subscribe to the same authoritative stance of that book as I do, then my appeal to that book doesn't matter.
Well, and being able to regurgitate that information at that speed doesn't bring you any reward or substance or access to it. It's still waiting on the validation of the person who asked for it to say, you what? You're right.
100%, 100%. And hey, by the way, that's the same thing for like teaching credentials, to bring it
Sure.
full circle, right? Teaching credential doesn't mean anybody is good or knowledgeable around actual education. It just means they've been taught to perpetuate that system. So if the accrediting body, you're not appealing to that authority altogether anyways, then it doesn't matter what kind of stuff they learn from that and what they're like, it doesn't matter. So yeah, man, we want people to have the conversations in real time, what that really means, really dive in, really think, come out with more questions than answers when it comes to that kind of stuff. 100%.
Well, dude, as we wrap thing up, anything I missed you really want to cover?
Man, this is great. I will just say, for anybody that's listening to this, parents, man, one of the things that I see more often than not is just parents being fearful. It is that. It is, they're so fearful of what are the right things to do to my kids versus, no, no, no. How do you do the right thing by you? How do you be the right person and bring your kids along with you on this journey of continuous growth? Like, that's what you're doing. You don't have to do as much to them as you have to do for yourself and for them with them.
Is
So
actually leading by action.
that's it, brother. That is it. Leading by action. So no, this is awesome, man. I appreciate you.
Where can people reach out, find you, all those wonderful things that we do at
All
the end of
those,
shows?
all those good things, man. People are. I'm actually batshit crazy enough to give the email, so people can reach out directly to me. Matt at Apogee Strong. Glad to do it, man. I'm glad to help in any way that I can. On IG at my name, at Apogee Program or apogeestrong.com. If you want to see what we're doing with all the schools, that website should be updated by October 1st to have everything we're doing on there. So that's a good place to go.
Yo, thank you for your time, brother. I really appreciate it.
Honor was mine.